Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.
Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Lori, and with me today is Mary Kate, and we're going to talk about improvisational piecing of a specific block. And I have to admit, this is a little hard for me.
I know it is. I know. I wanted to, it's a test. It's
Yes.
all a test. No. This is from, again, inspired by Pam Rocco, who is our regular columnist who writes our Words to Quilt By column, in which she always takes an idea. There's always some starting point, and then she usually shows 4, maybe 5 quilts that she made around a single idea. And the idea of this particular block is when she doesn't know where to start, she just takes a bag of scraps and she dumps them on her table, and then she goes from there. So that's why we have these batik scraps. Batiks were calling to us today, so we decided to choose those. And I know this is driving you crazy to have them laid out like this, but we wanted to sort of emulate the idea that we just dumped them out on the table,
Right.
just kind of hither and yon. So we're going to make a scrap block, and we published the pattern for scrap block as our free online pattern in conjunction with our September 2015 issue. So you can find it and download it. And in the pattern, we gave people specific measurements as a starting point, but as always, with a lot of these Pam Rocco patterns, those are suggestions.
Right.
They are not, don't have to be married to them. For the sake of this, we're going to kind of stick to that, but seriously, you can make these blocks any size you want.
Right.
So what we have here on the table in front of us is my test block, because I tested it out before I finished writing the pattern. Just took some scraps from my stash and went with it. And so that's that. We'll just put it aside for now. We might return to it later just to illustrate a certain point. But Lori and I are going to make this block. You and I are just going to start sewing.
Just sew.
So let's start with just choosing a basic or a piece of fabric, a scrap from which we can get 2 6-inch squares. Let's start with that. I love aqua and turquoise. I also love this.
That one's beautiful.
This was so pretty. So let's just quickly measure it. I'm pretty sure it's big enough. Yeah, it's big enough.
Yes, it's big enough.
So let's move these over. And we turned our cutting mat wrong side up so as not to be constrained and hemmed in by the lines on the cutting mat. We want to be
Right.
free and improvisational.
And if we cut a little crooked, it's okay.
Right.
And the lines on the mat make that really hard to do.
Right. Because we are in the business that we're in, we're going to cut these as probably pretty accurately. But if they go wonky, that's okay. There's all sorts of coping mechanisms or coping strips that Pam uses
Right.
in her quilts. I wanted to show this little scrap. This is not big enough for me to get 2 6-inch squares out of, but if I really loved this fabric, with this pattern, I could find a way to use it.
Right.
I could use it as a triangle and add strips to it, or use this as a strip to enlarge another block.
Something.
There's nothing too small for
Right.
this quilt. So let's just start here and find my measurements. And we said just 6 inches, not even 6.5. We're just starting at 6 inches. So let me do some math in my head, which is not always the easiest thing to do. I don't need to be too precious about this. Yeah, that should work out. And just cut. And while I'm cutting this, why don't you pick out a solid for our center strip? And whatever pleases you.
Let's see, I think that one would be
Don't
perfect.
get too precious about this. Just cut, for crying in the night. It doesn't matter. Don't get all caught up in it. That's beautiful.
I think that'll be really pretty with that one.
So you just cut these into squares.
So again, you're making 6-inch squares.
And even, like I said, I'm trying not to get too precious about it. Here, why don't you cut these, do you mind cutting them in half?
I'd
and
be
then
happy
I'll
to.
kind of figure
While
out
you
how
get
I'm
that sorted out.
Yeah. We don't need a lot of this. I don't know, do you want to do a thick strip or a skinny strip with this?
Let's do a skinny strip.
Okay. Wow, this has a really nice feel to it. All right. And I'm just going to I'm not even really going to measure it.
That's still open. That's still open.
Oh, thank you. I thought you meant the fabric. I was like, I know it's open. I unfolded it. How does that look?
Yeah, that'll be good.
Just eyeballing it. I'm not even measuring it. In our pattern, we give specific measurements, again, as a place to start. The only thing is you want to cut this strip longer than the short side of your triangle.
Right.
So, at least a ½ inch, maybe an inch. I don't know. Do you want me to cut another strip around the same width, or skinnier or wider?
Let's do something different, not the same.
Okay.
Just because I want to see how it looks.
Let's go skinnier, just for fun. That's pretty thin. It's like an inch. All right. And so,
And this goes on the straight grain of the triangle, right?
yes. Now we're working with batik, so there's no right or wrong side.
Correct.
But obviously, you would do right sides together. And you can align that triangle anywhere you want on that strip. You just want to, have a little bit of breathing room maybe between the tip and the
Okay.
end of the strip.
Okay, that makes sense
Yeah.
as I think about how the block works.
But if you don't, again, no harm, no foul. With this, it really doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
So, okay, I'm going to put these away. And while you're stitching those, I'm going to pick out fabrics for our next set of units. You need the way this quilt was done, Pam used 2 sets of matching units per block.
Right.
So,
And now I just want to observe that I probably needed to start this a little farther, the pink solid up a little farther, because I don't have quite enough to get to the tip with a seam allowance.
but we can play with the placement of the
Exactly.
ruler when you get the whole thing together and we can see.
Well, and my thought was, because this is improv, I can make this strip skinnier at this point, and
Sure.
then the center would be at a different
so
place.
smart.
So that is what I'm going to do.
Okay. That didn't even occur to me. I love this color. I'll use these 2. I'm just going to give this a little press.
And I want the
You're cutting.
ruler.
Oh, okay.
I think it's fun to sew with someone.
I don't do it almost ever.
Oh, see, I think it's wonderful because we get the combined brain power.
Sure.
You think of things I don't think of,
Right.
and I think of things that you don't think of,
Right.
and together we come up with better projects than we
Indeed.
would by ourselves.
Indeed. Okay, let's see. All right. These may end up being a little bit bigger.
But because it's improv, it's okay.
Exactly.
It'll all come out in the end.
So as you can see with the Pam's quilt, with her scrap block quilt, there are some units that are small, and she sized them up with
Right.
strips, and there are some that maybe ended up a little bit too big, and she, cut them down, trimmed them up to the size, to be a uniform size. I don't even know if these are the same exact size triangles. I'm just
And
letting
it's
you know.
okay.
They're not, and they're a little off. This is just down and dirty quilting. I do want to cut, though, right on the diagonal. That I do want to do. Although it might be interesting to freehand cut the
That's
triangles and
right.
really see how loose can we get with this.
And that's part of the fun of the whole improv thing, is that if it comes out differently than you expected, it's okay. You can just do something more to make it work.
And I'm just going to cut a wonky strip here. All right, here's what you have to work with. Have
Cool,
fun.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, that's going to be interesting to see.
Do you do a lot of wonky stuff in your own work?
When I'm doing pieced backs,
Right, right.
Yes,
So as
but-
we've said before, you are not a fan of improvisational wonky piecing for your quilt fronts. You tend to be pretty traditional and,
I do.
and meticulous. But when it comes to your backs, all bets are off.
yes, the rules go out the window.
Now with these, I think if you wanted your strips to meet up in the center of your block, it might matter how you press your seams.
Oh,
but
right.
since these are going to be hitting at different points, I don't really see that it matters that you press some seams toward the strip and the other set of seams away
Correct.
from the strip. I just don't think it matters.
I think this one with the wonky center strip is going to be fun. An interesting look.
Yes, yes. Okay, so I've got these first 2 units pressed, and now I'm going to trim them. And I'm going to use the 90-degree corner of my rotary ruler.
Okay.
And even if I had a narrower one, I could turn it if I had to. So I could start it out, you know, if it wasn't going to be quite wide enough to reach, to allow me to cut uninterruptedly from edge to edge, I could at least cut one side. Let's do it like this. I could at least cut one side and then flip it to cut the other, to trim the other. So let's give that a try. But for this first cut, I am going to align it with the edge of this triangle just because it gives me that nice angle. And I could center it right here,
right,
you know, so that I know, and very good piecing, so of course it's all lining up. So just for our purposes for this first one, let's just center it and like that.
But that's a cool thing that you point out. I don't have to have that pink strip going up the center. I could scoot it to one side or the other a little bit and see how it looks.
Actually, let's see. I'm going to play, I'm going to line the far end of my ruler with the other side of the triangle, and I'm going to actually trim off kind of a bit there.
So now that is no longer in the center.
That is quite a bit different. Yeah, I mean, that might have been a little extreme, but by the time the seam allowance gets taken up, we still will have up the point happening ideally in the solid strip. So we got that going on. Okay, we've got these done. We just chop that off, press it. Ooh, that's a tight little squeeze in there, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And then on this one with the big wide strip, it's totally the opposite, where you've got all sorts of room to play.
Yep. These types of blocks can get pretty addicting.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you realize how quickly they go, and you just, if you're in the mood not, you know, there are times where being meticulous and precise is what you want. Do you want to, how about you trim that one?
I'd be happy to.
But there are times where just, you know, letting loose is
well,
so
and I can see that this would be a great place to do, use up your scrap pile.
Mm-hmm. Hence scrap block, you know, she just dumps out her scraps and figures, you know, that I guess just lets them speak to her.
Yes.
What kind of a quilt do you want to be, Scraps? Tell me. All right. Ooh, I'm liking that. Here's one more. That is pretty.
That's beautiful. And like I said, you could just do all sorts of things depending on what you have in your scrap box.
Mm-hmm.
And now, because we did a big wide strip, this needs trimmed on this side.
But I wouldn't trim it until you get the whole thing joined. Because then you can figure out how you want to even trim the block. Do we have time to join these pieces?
Let's not.
Okay. So you get the idea. And again, I did this pretty, it's so pretty. I don't want to cover up what we did here. I didn't deviate too much with my test block. But again, I was impressed with how easily these points all met.
Right.
That was didn't take a lot of work. It just, it all fit together. So you can be, let's just show people really quickly what you would do then is you would just join these 2 quarter-inch seams, same thing there.
And these 2.
And then join them down the center.
Right.
And you're going to get that nice convergence. And
Right.
that is fun. Again, if it's too small, put a strip on the side.
Exactly.
Too big, cut it down.
And just have fun.
Just have fun. Okay. When the camera cuts off, I think we might have to make a few.
We might have to play some more. Well, thank you for joining us today, and do come back and see us again next time.
Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.